All right, welcome to another episode of our podcast. My name is David Levine, founder and CEO of Rethinking Solutions. Today's topic we are talking about is funding trends in biotech and the resilience of growing a startup. And I'd like to welcome today's guest, Scott. So, Scott, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Hi, thank you, David. Thank you for asking me to join. My name's Scott Thacher. I'm the CEO and founder of Orphagen Pharmaceuticals, based in San Diego. Yes, resilience is a very important topic to us, but just a brief word about our history. I left a pharma job so that we could go after novel targets that potentially could be transformative for a variety of diseases. And I saw this as a missing piece in what pharma does. They take projects that are later, more mature, and also something that was missing in academia. Academia likes to identify potential drug targets, but not find the drugs and test them. So we've filled that blank area, and now we've got an advanced program for a rare and pretty much untreatable cancer that's ready to go into the clinic. So I'd like to talk about some of the challenges we've had in moving that program forward and some of the ways we've tried to solve them.
All right, well, sounds great. Well, I appreciate that insight, and I will certainly get to that. But just wanted to start out with just one kind of quick topic related, question related to our topic today, which I think would be also a good segue as we get into these other pieces. But I know biotech funding has shifted a lot over the past few years. And so, from your perspective, what trends are having the biggest impact on early stage companies trying to bring innovative therapies to market?
Well, the biggest trend is that with the low interest rates that were available during COVID to promote economic recovery, biotech companies went all in, went public, VC firms helped a lot of companies start. And now now with higher interest rates and the competition from AI, it's much harder to do the follow-on investments for those companies. So they may have gotten into the clinic and generated clinical data, but they're having a very difficult time finding funding. The investors have to make decisions on which companies to let go or not. Meanwhile, those of us that have not entered the clinic yet have found it unusually difficult to raise money. And this is what I hear from other people. This is not just my own experience because I'm doing my first venture and equity fundraise at this point. One of the things that's made it possible to move forward, of course, is partnerships and also grant funding in the life sciences. That comes largely from, but not exclusively, from the National Institutes of Health through a program called the Small Business Innovation Research. And that takes about 3.5% of total NIH grant funding and sets it aside for small businesses. And that's huge. That's huge for company formation. Parenthetically, that program is hung up in the Senate. It's not being renewed as it should be, and it's been around for 40 years. So that has some of us pretty nervous at this point. So it's a tough environment, and so I could elaborate more on our strategy. It's usually an all of the above strategy that we need to take.
All right. Well, then let's get more into your business background a little bit. So I know you've built your business around finding, first-in-class targets in areas most companies are overlooking, as you mentioned earlier. So what advantages and challenges come with running such a discovery-focused organization?
The advantages are that you're in new territory. It's exciting for the scientists that you hire. You can get some funding from the NIH because they do care about bringing new targets into the mainstream. The biggest challenge is convincing the bigger money investors that the target is worthwhile. Because by definition, if you're the first group to identify, in our case, small molecules that turn this target on and off, and you show a potential therapeutic effect in an animal model, the question always comes up, well, couldn't that effect be bigger? And what will really happen when we put this molecule into the clinic? That's the biggest challenge, is convincing people to take a weight of evidence approach, both what you see in an animal model, because the animal models are always imperfect, and the other biological data that's out there to say, okay, this is worth a chance. So as a scientist, it's been very exciting for me. So that was my background. I got a PhD in biophysics and biochemistry and layered on cell biology, and then worked in industry for 8 years in drug discovery before I decided that the real excitement would be in these novel targets. And so the biggest challenge for me was making a business case for the novel targets. So let me take a shot at that. The biggest one is that you have much less competition. So if your drug works and works well, then you're going to dominate a market segment. So you need to identify that market segment, and you are less likely to be, displaced by somebody working on the same target, because it's likely that everybody else is going to be a few years behind. And so you don't have the problem that somebody else is going to say, well, our drug's a little bit better, so you have to bow out. So that's the advantage of being a first mover. And so they're really huge advantages once you get the money to go into the clinic. But the risk-reward ratio overall is higher. So if I say, well, here's a drug for breast cancer that was just approved by, let's say, Roche, and I think I can make that a little bit better, and here are the criteria, that's a somewhat lower risk equation, because you know that you're pretty sure that this class of drug is going to work in your hands just the way it did for Roche. But obviously, it's important to get the new targets into the mainstream. That's where you get the breakthroughs.
All right.
So,
Well,
yeah. And I'll give one example. We identified the first compounds to a target in a class of immune cells called T cells. And in fact, it was a new type of T cell. So there was a lot of feeling that this was kind of a missing link in inflammation. And we got a partner to move the program forward, and everybody else heard about this target because it was published, and I guess knew that we had cracked the problem of identifying small molecule ligands. So ultimately, there were probably 20 people in industry going after this target. Ultimately, it had efficacy, but the safety issues prevented this program from moving forward. So I guess that's the other side of our strategy. We said, let's look at multiple targets, because we don't know when we're going to find something that turns it on and off. And then we don't know how well it's going to work in animal models, and we don't know how well it's going to work in human. So we were able to shift some of the risk to a partner who was genuinely a great partner and very excited about the program, namely the risk that there would be a failure in human. Now, the lead program we have today has special advantages because we're working on a rare and untreatable cancer. And the type of relatively minor side effects that prevented this autoimmune or inflammation program that I just referred to from succeeding as a clinical program don't exist or are ameliorated in the cancer side, because minor effects like a little bit of diarrhea don't hold a cancer drug back, especially when somebody's life is at risk. And so we're pretty excited about the program that we're trying to take into the clinic on our own time. Now, fortunately, there are people out there, and this is the Texas angle that your listeners may want to hear about. Funding agencies do take an interest in novel targets. And in our case, the Cancer Prevention and Research Institute of Texas has decided to set aside $10.2 million for our initial clinical trial. So that makes our fundraising a little bit easier, because now we have to find money to match the $10.2 million in order to get that trial started. And I suppose just to make this whole story real, I should tell you what the cancer is. It's a rare cancer of the adrenal gland. The adrenal gland sits on top of your kidney and makes hormones that control blood pressure and, overall state of energy. And although the cancers are rare, we think there are several hundred patients being treated today in the United States with a suboptimal, very toxic, very difficult to use drug. And that if we can replace it with a drug that goes to the core on-off switch for the adrenal gland and potentially the cancer, that market will increase to, say, 1,500 patients. So these folks, that's the opportunity to help thousands of patients over the years in the United States. The other thing to remember about this cancer is that patients are younger. So you'll have people in their 20s who get diagnosed with metastatic adrenocortical cancer, and the median lifespan today is maybe 12 to 15 months. So they can pass away within a year despite the best efforts of their clinicians and surgeons. So that's one thing that's exciting. The other is that the FDA knows that adrenocortical cancer has been untreatable for years. The one approved drug was approved, I think, 55 years ago, and they know it's not very good. And so they're willing to give accelerated approval for a drug that works. And what that means is that they'll allow a shorter clinical trial. And once the clinical trial is complete and the data looks good, they'll analyze that data and go to approval much more quickly than they would for a new, let's say, second-in-class blood pressure drug that's going to be used on a much larger population. The net effect is between the time that we get approval to run the trial from the FDA to approval to sell the drug could be as short as 5 years. And that's really fast for drug development. So that pushes up the value of the program. In other words, you don't wait 10 years to sell your drug. You can begin getting revenue within 5. We think the drug would be approved, if all goes well, as first-line therapy, which means that it would be rapidly commercialized as well, which is an important question that comes up all the time. Yeah, you got your drug approved, but now can you sell it? And so we would have that support of clinicians and hopefully patients in the FDA to make that possible. So those are some of the advantages of going off after a rare disease. And this one, of course, is important because the course of the disease is so rapid and the tools that clinicians have today to treat it are so poor, which means that our contribution can be recognized in the form of a financial return to our investors, which is really, really, really important for getting the money to do the trial. And I've gone to a couple of patient advocacy meetings, and those folks are they're tough. I mean, if they're not getting good care, they'll go find another physician who will push the envelope to help them out. It's really a dedicated group of people. So I feel very lucky that that's the type of disease and the type of patient that we're in a position to work with.
No, it sounds like it's a great work, and it sounds like there's you know, that group of people will be really appreciative for, all the work that you put into, hopefully bring something to market that will be of much more benefit to them.
And I think the one part I left out on the investor message, of course, number one, the FDA is going to help us out. They're going to help us get rapid approval. And then you can ask the insurance companies to pay premium pricing. And that's where the investor gets their return. And there are drugs comparable to ours that are selling at $500,000 a year. And I hesitate to say this because that's a lot of money, but companies who have done this, who've paved a path that we're following, have worked very closely with patients and their insurance companies to make sure that every patient who needs it gets the drug, and every insurance company that ought to be reimbursing those costs is reimbursing those costs. And that's how you generate, that's the overall social deal. Excuse me. At some point, the drug becomes generic, and of course, the price goes way down.
Okay. Well, and kind of touching on the funding you mentioned, I know earlier you talked about grants. I know over the years you've been able to do different grants. So what's
Yeah.
been the key to creating the proposals and research programs that are consistently rising to the top?
Boy, a lot of writing, getting the team together to create preliminary data, get somebody who's done it before to read the grant, and then um, really write the heck out of it so it's clear. And we've had maybe a 30% success rate. So there've been a lot of piles of paper that didn't go anywhere.
And I know you've also been talking about partnerships, and I know they've been a big part of your story. So how do you decide which collaborations are worth pursuing, especially when balancing the science, funding, and long-term strategy?
Wow, that's a great question. Yeah, our first project where we scored was this autoimmune disease project. And I was looking for investors. I found a partner who was well respected. One of my key board members had worked with them before or knew about them. And my chemist said, this is going to be a difficult target to make good compounds. And so I thought, if I take 10 million of investor money, it may not be enough, and the investor's going to be going crazy. But if I work with a partner who's really good at this, then we can take some of that partnership funding, the upfront, and we can start to pull other targets along. So that's how I made that decision for the first project. And then we were able to expand that partnership and talk about other targets in the same space with the same company. That strengthened the company, strengthened Orphagen along the way. So really building a relationship with a solid outside company was very helpful to our development. And I think that makes sense because really the risk that the VC may be thinking about is what's going to happen in the clinic. And so now we've gotten close to the clinic. We've got a compound which is ready to present to the FDA as a candidate for a clinical trial, and we've got partial covering of those costs. So now, if I have a choice, I'll take investor money to move the program forward to see what happens in the clinic. But we're looking at everything under the sun. And maybe this is the right time to thank the people of Texas for the CPRIT program. It's really, I think it's really going to make a difference in this case, especially now. Anyway, that's my PSA.
It's a great message. I appreciate that. It's very interesting work that y'all do, but kind of looking more at yourself now versus the business. So I know you spent decades pushing innovation forward in both industry and academia. So what part of your role today gives you the most energy or sense of accomplishment?
Wow. Well, I'm trying to learn the investment part, but the thing that's most exciting is seeing data and realizing that at one point we kind of said, well, here's A, B, and C, and D. When you put them all together, you should have a drug. But nobody's done that before. And then pulling all that together to create something that's workable, that's definitely one of the high points. And I've been lucky to have some really good people who have signed on to that mission. And that's because drug discovery is very multidisciplinary. And I kind of provide the biology perspective, but you need a chemist who's got insight into drug design. You need people with hardcore drug development skills who pay attention to the safety and properties of the drug in order to have this move forward. And their contributions have been essential. So the team aspect is pretty exciting too.
All right. Well, phenomenal. So and I know we've talked about a lot that you have going on, but are there any major initiatives you're currently focused on right now, whether that's in the pipeline, expansion, partnerships, or operational growth that maybe has you really excited either you may have mentioned it or something else that you're currently working on that you'd like to mention as well?
Sure. Well, our main topic is finding matching funds for CPRIT plus some to expand what we had in that proposal. But new initiatives, we have a program for inflammatory bowel disease. And I think Paul Crow, our VP of R&D, and myself are starting to believe that the animal data we have is pretty impressive. And so we're excited about that because it's a very differentiated target from the approaches people are using today. So that's number one. Number two, when I was down in Texas, we met a group that could help us understand expansion indications for our adrenocortical cancer drug because it's directed to a specific target, and that's present in all or virtually all adrenocortical cancers, but it also gets turned on in some other cancers. And we're looking for ways to get data on what it might do. And I think we found a company down here in Houston, actually, that can help us. So that would, take, flesh on the bones. So those are two big things. The biggest, of course, is starting a clinical trial for adrenocortical cancer. That's our main focus.
Okay. And kind of with that in mind, I know a lot of the work that you do in the research, can not necessarily because you may not necessarily have patient data, but because it may be proprietary as you're trying to, develop and bring something new to market. And then even if we look at once you do go to clinical trial, how do y'all manage or look at handling the data security or just your cybersecurity in general to make sure all your IP and any
Yeah.
sensitive information is protected?
Well, the main thing is, let's see, on IP, the main thing is to file patents. Of course, and then we have all our data in now in Microsoft Cloud. So we used to have a server. Going back to the funding issues, they were so tight that we had to close our laboratories, and we were already using Microsoft Cloud then, so we moved everything there, and have the usual protocols. Now, when it comes to clinical data and stuff like that, we're going to be learning about that once we get the trial started. We're obviously working with people who do that day in and day out. Yeah, so data security is, if somebody comes in and wreaks havoc with your back end, you're in serious trouble. And then there's intellectual property filings, and we work with a very good international firm. And there, it's usually a balance of how soon do you want to put your data into a patent, because obviously that makes it available for other people to look at. The later you do it, the longer the patent is good for. But if you wait too long and somebody else scoops you, then you have nothing at all. So we think about that constantly. But right now, we've got, for the cancer drug, we've got a very clear patent position. Patents are under examination in India, China, EU, US, Japan, and they're in the clear. So that's good.
All right. Well, no, that sounds great. I appreciate the insights and the story and everything you shared. I know as we kind of are approaching our time
Oh,
and kind of
yes.
wrapping up, are there any final thoughts or anything else you'd like to share with our audience?
Well, San Diego has been great. There are a lot of people working in biotech. We started an organization in 2010, I think, 2009, called San Diego Entrepreneurs Exchange. And the idea was that entrepreneurs would get together and talk to each other and share information and insights. And I was a big advocate of that because I heard so many talks of venture capitalists saying, this is what we like. We like this, we don't like that. And I thought, we're the inventors, right? And so to invent requires special skills, how to get those grants, how to find good people. So that organization has been very helpful. I hope the concept will spread.
Oh, it sounds like a great concept, and I appreciate you sharing. So, for anyone else who'd like additional information or might want to reach out, we'll have all the information below the video in the description.
That's
Scott,
great.
really want to thank you for coming on and speaking with us today.
Thank you very much, David. Those were great questions. I really enjoyed the opportunity to talk with you.